I'm going to be showing how to make a beginner project with alcohol ink. This uses minimal amount of supplies and it's a good project to start with. I'm using, my paper is a photo inkjet paper. This is Kirkland brand. You use the back side of it, not the front side. The front side absorbs ink and you want the ink to float on the back. So this is a non-porous surface. I'm going to be using, to move the ink, a drinking straw. And the reason that I use a drinking straw is twofold. One is that the bendy part of the straw allows you to direct the flow of air really well. And the other reason is that the ends are very different. So I'm never going to forget which end I'm blowing into. So I don't want to put my mouth on the part that's had either ink or alcohol on it. So I always know that the straight part of the straw is what I'm going to be using to blow the air from. So the other things I'm going to be using are, I'm using 99% isopropyl alcohol. It comes in a lot of different percentages. The percentage that's not alcohol is water, so you want to have one that's at least 90% alcohol. So they can be found in pharmacies or you can buy them online. I got that on Amazon. The inks that I'm using in this video, I'm just using one color. This is Senorita Magenta, which I always want to call Senorita Margarita, but it's Senorita Magenta made by Pinata. And I've taken that, I'm going to use some of it concentrated right from the bottle, and some of it I put in this little squeeze bottle. Also got this on Amazon, where I put about halfway filled the bottle with alcohol, and then I put about 8 or 9 drops of the concentrated color into it, because I want this to be a very diluted version of the same color that I'm using. If you don't have one of these squeeze bottles, you can put a bit of alcohol in a little medicine cup or a little plastic cup or paper cup of any kind and use it diluted. And then if you're going to do that, what you'll want to do is take the alcohol or the diluted ink and dab a small paintbrush in it and dot it on. When you see me squeezing from the squeeze bottle, you'll want to dot that on from a paintbrush if you don't have the squeeze bottle. The other thing I'm going to be using is a black Sharpie marker. I think most people have them, that's why I'm using it. You can use black alcohol ink if you have that, or you can use black acrylic paint if you have that, but I think most people do have a black magic marker hanging around somewhere. And then this is optional. I'm going to just show you how to use a paint pen at the end to fill in the center, but that again is optional. So you can do this project with a drinking straw, a piece of non-porous paper, and one alcohol ink, and one small container of alcohol. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the alcohol, the diluted alcohol first, and I'm going to make dots in a circle on this paper. And then I'm going to make, each time I put a drop of the ink down, I'm going to make a quick puff of air to spread it out. And this is not, it's not super fussy. I'm not, there's no expertise required. I'm just touching this down. I'm not really squeezing this and just giving it a little puff. So it's pretty light, so it might be a little bit difficult to see on here, but I hope not. So I'm just going to touch that down, puff, and then move it around. I'm going to kind of let it dry before I go on to the next section. That's the only part that you really kind of have to remember. So I'm going to be going around in a circle, probably more of an oval because of the shape of this paper, and make an exterior circle around it. Then I'm going to start a little bit in and make kind of concentric circles around, but I'm going to leave the center of this empty. And when you're blowing from a straw, you want to take your time because you don't want to get lightheaded from blowing too much air too rapidly. But that's okay because you really want this to dry before you put the next petal down, so it's okay that it's taken a little longer. By the way, I put a trash bag down on my table and taped it down because sometimes the ink will splatter and you don't want to get that on, you know, on a finished surface and ruin it. Okay, so as you can see, this is not excessively tidy. It's okay. So I'm gonna let them dry a little bit. Then I'm gonna start a little bit inside that circle and make another circle. And they overlap, just like the petals on a flower would. Okay, so I'm gonna pick this up. You can see it a little better here. So now we have the exterior super light colors in there. Give it a second to dry. And then I'm gonna take the more concentrated ink. And I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna start in the circle in closer to the center, but I'm still leaving the very center free. So I'm just touching this down, barely. I'm letting that dry because when I put the ink down, if I put the ink on a dry surface, it does bleed as I blow it out, but I can control it a little bit. If I put wet on wet, it's going to bleed, but it's going to kind of have a mind of its own and have an uncontrolled bleed. And to the extent that it's possible, you do want to control it. There's a lot of element of accidental art in alcohol ink, and that's one of the beauties of it. But it's not, you want to have some degree of control over it. So I'm just going to touch that down. And you can see it's kind of moving. It's got a mind of its own. And you can tell that it's drying when it goes from a more shiny surface to a little bit more of a matte kind of surface. The drinking straw really does a good job in allowing you to control the amount of air that you're blowing on it, much more than the airbrush does. So there we go, perfectly imperfect. And then I'm going to let this dry for a sec, and then I'm going to take the marker and scribble in the center there. Alcohol inks are, or Sharpie markers are made from alcohol inks, so this is going to work similarly to how an alcohol ink pen, or how the alcohol inks from the bottle would work. You can actually make your own alcohol inks from old Sharpie markers by breaking, just breaking this open, and there's a little felt thing inside here that, that the ink is sitting in. So you could take a tweezers, grab that piece of felt out, and put it in one of these little bottles with plain alcohol in it, and over maybe a day or so, let that sit in there, and then pull the felt out, and then you'll have a bottle of alcohol ink. And I actually make a lot of my own alcohol inks like this. This is from an old Sharpie, and I'm pretty satisfied. I think they work just as well in a lot of cases as the purchased ones. So I just scribbled a circle in the center of this, and then I'm going to take some plain alcohol, also in a squeeze bottle. Let this dry for a sec. And I'm going to touch it to the very edge of this and blow out a little bit. And that's going to make little shadow around the edge of this. And also it'll kind of look like some veins going through the petals. Make sure to let that dry before you go on to the next part. I'll hold it up so you can kind of see what's going on there. And you don't have to go in any particular order. And as I'm doing this, it's taking some of the ink from the center, so it's lightening it up. It's going to look kind of blotchy, but that's not a problem because I'm going to go back over that with the marker again later. Be careful not to inhale as you're doing that through the straw. You don't really want to be breathing in this alcohol. So this is where we are now with it. And I'm going to go back over this center there. Okay, so if you don't have a white pen, then this is your project and it looks pretty good. But if you do have a white pen or some white alcohol ink, this pen is called a Posca pen. Give it a shake before you start with it. And then I'm just going to make little dots in the very center of this to make it look more like the center of a flower would usually look. And I'm going to do a number of layers of this. The first layer is going to be partially absorbed into the black center, so it's going to kind of gray it out, which is fine. And then let that dry for a sec and go back over it with some more white. And I'm going to keep doing this for several layers. To make it look more natural. And then if you want to, you can make some dots with a black pen there too. If you have white alcohol ink, you can put a tiny bit of white alcohol ink in a cup like this and use that to make the dots. So this is white ink called Snow Cap. And you don't need a lot. You really don't need a lot. So I'm going to use this toothpick kind of thing, and I could use that to dot on here if I wanted to. Some people use gel pens, they work too. And just dotting all over the place. And the parts where you want it to look like the sunlight is hitting first to highlight, just put some more dots of white there. So this is a great starter project. It is endlessly fascinating to work with this stuff. This can take several layers, so for now I'm just going to say that I'm done with it, and I'm going to hold it up and I'll put a photograph of the finished piece. I'm going to show you next how to make a slightly more complicated flower. Not difficult, but it takes a little practice. The paper I'm using is called Crafty plastic. It's a plastic, so it's completely non-porous, and this is great because you can wipe it off any part of it that you don't want. And in fact, I did make something that I didn't like, and I just took a spray bottle full of alcohol, sprayed it on there, wiped it off with a paper towel, and it's just like new. The other thing that you can use is Yupp paper. You can use photo inkjet paper, use the back of it, which is the plasticky non-porous side, or you can use white ceramic tiles, glossy tiles. You can use glass. You could do this on a mirror. Any super non-porous surface will work. I'm going to use alcohol. I use 99% isopropyl alcohol. I bought it online, and it's in a little squeeze bottle. If you don't have a little bottle, you could put it in a small paper or plastic cup and use a tiny paintbrush to put the alcohol down. But this works really, really well, so I'm sticking with this. And then to make this flower, what I'm going to do is first put down, I'm using Amethyst and by Tim Holtz Ranger ink. And the other color that I'm going to use is Pinata Mantilla Black. So I'm just going to put a couple of drops down in a circle. And I'm just going to let that dry. I could take a hairdryer and dry it. If I was going to do that, I would want to go from really high up because I don't want to splash the ink around. I want it to stay in that circle. And as this dries, you can see that it's going to create kind of a darker border around the edge, and then it sort of dries inward. If I were to put a drop of alcohol right in the center of this, it would push the inks out, and then as it dries, it kind of recenters in there. It's very interesting to watch. You should just play with the ink too. If you have some, just see what it does. It's really fascinating, really interesting medium. So, and the way that alcohol inks work is that there's a pigment that's in the isopropyl alcohol, kind of like what watercolor is. The pigment is dispersed in water. In alcohol inks, the pigment is dispersed in alcohol, and after it's dried, you can reactivate it with more alcohol. So I'm going to put this on a low speed and sit real high up. And I can tell when it's drying because it goes from being shiny when it's wet to a more matte look. And as it dries, I can get closer to hurry it up. But in the beginning, you don't want to be close to it at all. Okay, and then I'm going to put on the center of this, I'm going to put a little bit of Mantilla Black. Not a lot. And then I'm going to let that dry. So what we're going to do when this dries is I'm going to show you with this stylus what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this alcohol bottle and I'm going to make a little pool of alcohol in the shape of an oval. And then I'm going to take the airbrush and holding it straight up and down, I'm going to activate the air and it's going to start to push that alcohol outward. I'm not going to angle the airbrush towards it. I'm going to stay straight up and down, and I may move along with it, but I'm not going to point it at it. If anything, I'm going to point the air towards the center. Okay. And I have this on a paper towel, so that if it does get towards the edge of this, I can kind of tap it off there, so because sometimes it has a tendency to roll back on. But I know that I'm going to be matting this on a 5x7 mat, so I cut my paper 8x6 so that I won't have to worry about the edges. Another thing that you can do is you can put Scotch tape around the edges, and then later on you can pull that off, and then that looks like it's got a border on it. So I'm going to take this, as I said, I'm going to make this little oval shape, starting in the black, moving out towards the amethyst, and then off onto the crafty plastic paper, and then I'm going to push the air on it. So give it kind of like this. And I can tip the paper a bit if I want to kind of direct it. Okay, and this is what I was talking about, how it goes off to the edge. Not super worried about that for a couple of reasons. One is that this crafty plastic paper is really good about being able to clean off the edges, but also that's not going to show in my final project, so because it's going to be matted over that. The other thing I can do is, if it really bothers me, which it may because things bother me sometimes, is that I can take it when I'm done to the paper cutter and just chop off the edges that I don't like. Okay, so I'm going to put this little oval-y thing there, and I'm going straight down. I'm following this, but not aiming at it. And I can, if I feel like it's not going right, I can kind of direct it a little bit with this Q-tip. Then I'm not worried about these open spaces here. I'm going to go back and fill these in. I'm just working around. And I'm making sure that this gets dry. Because if I stop before it's dry, sometimes the ink will pool back, and that is usually not a good look. Again, straight down. I'm following it, but not aiming at it. And I can direct it a little bit with a Q-tip like that. And if there's stuff there that I really hate, which usually I would not remove this right away because it's probably going to be covered by something else. But I'm just going to show you that if there's something that you really, really don't want, you can take a Q-tip with a little bit of alcohol on it. And because the paper is non-porous, the ink didn't soak into the paper, it's on top of it. So, but again, I probably would not have done that if this wasn't a demonstration, because I'm probably going to put another petal over that and it's going to be covered anyway. So if I have a petal that I don't like, not worried about it, because after a little bit I can go over and make another one in between there and it'll cover that up. Sometimes, unfortunately, you cover up ones you do like too, but you know. If you push too hard with your air, you get these little spindly things, which I don't like. I mean, if you like them, then that's how you get them. So this is what we have so far. Oops. And I'm going to let this dry for a minute. I'm probably going to use a hairdryer to accelerate that because I'm going to do the center here with some white paint pen. And you can just fiddle with this as much or as little as you want. When it gets to a point where you're happy with it, then you're done. One person's done is not the same as another person's done. But I think that when this is going to be in a mat with the center done, I think this is going to be very nice. So I'm saying for this, I'm done with it for now. So I'm taking this white Sharpie paint pen. I use this, and sometimes I use this Posca pen. There's another thing you can use, which is a white alcohol ink that you can use to dab on with a small paintbrush. So I'm going to do the center. I'm going to kind of give this some texture by just making lots and lots of little dots. And the area that I want to appear to be highlighted as though it was the part that was getting the most sun, I'm going to just do more dots there. And I'm going to be patient with this, and it's going to take several layers of this, because the first layers, as I put them down, they're going to be absorbed into that black center. And that's nice because it gives it a different color feel to it. I'm sure that I'm using the wrong terms. I am entirely untaught, self-taught, YouTube taught, no training whatsoever. So just kind of do this by the seat of my pants. And that's why I know that anybody out there is also able to do this, because you don't have to have a degree to do this. And you should really just enjoy it and have fun with it. So I'm just making lots and lots of little dots here, and then I'm gonna let it dry in between the layers so that when I put down more of the paint, it won't all soak in. I want it to be whiter at the edges. So when you do this, the paint pen, sometimes it'll get some of the ink on top of it, on the tip, so just dab it off on a paper towel. And then, you know, as the first paint comes out, it's real bright, and then it's absorbing in. But eventually, as I do layers, it'll be brighter. Hi, I'm going to show you a third way to make a very simple, easy to do alcohol ink picture that has a kind of a big punch to it. So this one, you do need a little bit more in the way of supplies. These are alcohol ink pens. You can buy them individually or in sets at almost any craft store. They're a little on the pricey side, but you don't need a lot of them. You could use 2 or 3 colors as well. I happen to have a set with more, so I'm going to use them, but not a big deal at all. So I'm just going to quickly show you how to do it. This is a really fast and easy one. So these markers, I think almost all the alcohol ink markers have this. There's a chisel tip side and a pointy side. I'm going to use the chisel tip side, and I'm gonna make lines, just scribble lines radiating from the center outward. Leave a little space in between them, or you could do it right next to each other if you wanted, not a big deal. Just going to do this all the way around, and you know, I'm using quite a few colors, but if you have fewer colors, not a problem, just use that. And this isn't something that you have to give a really lot of thought to. I'm just using this and leaving the center empty, because I'm going to put some, later on I'm going to put black in there and make the center of the flower in that section. So now I'm going to take some isopropyl alcohol, just plain alcohol, and I'm going to use my airbrush, but you can use anything you want. You can use the Ranger air blower. In fact, maybe I'll use that. I haven't used that in videos for a while. So this is just like a giant ear bulb. I'm going to put some alcohol down and then just blow this out. And again, like I said in a previous video, the I use 5x7 mats. So, and I'm by the way, I'm deliberately letting this leach into each other. I'm using a 5x7 mat, so I know that the edges are not going to show. So I'm not really worried about whether the very corners are messy. They probably will be. And then just blow this around any old which way. This is on that crafty plastic, which is very non-absorbent. So this takes a little bit longer to dry, which is fine with me. Some of the other kinds of papers absorb a little bit more and they may dry faster. So this gives it kind of a rainbowy effect. And now I'm going to take some black alcohol ink. I'm going to make sure that it's very dry in the center where I'm going to put this, because I don't want it to start spreading yet. I'm going to put a drop of black there, let it dry. So again, same way that I did before, I'm going to take this, I'm going to put a drop on the edge, let it sit for just a moment, and then spread that out. And the main difference with this one compared to the one before is that this doesn't have another color in it beneath it. So this one, it's just, I think it's a really cool effect that it's like darkness going into color. I just think it's really kind of a metaphor. And same technique, just putting a drop in the black and then straight down. If you want it to be darker and to have the veins a little bit more prominent, then what you would want to do would be to let the alcohol pool a little bit longer before you blow it out like that. And make sure that you dry it completely before you go on to the next section. So you can see it's already quite early on. It's looking nice. I'm gonna, oops, alright. I have to invoke the 5-second ago rule. Where I wish I had not dropped alcohol on that 5 seconds ago. Okay, so here's where we are now, and I'm going to show you another thing that you can do, don't have to, but just a possibility, is that you can take some kind of a little, you can just use a cotton ball, or I mean I have this little piece of felt here, so I'm going to put a little bit of alcohol on this piece of felt, and I can kind of dab it, and it kind of makes a little nice border on this. You could do this by putting a color on this, of course, too, if you wanted to, but the colors kind of morph into each other on this anyway, so. And then another thing that you could do, if you wanted to, is to take a little bit of alcohol into one of these little paint dishes, and you could take this and make some little dots, and wherever you put the plain alcohol, it's going to move the inks away, so it makes these little bubbly kind of things that are kind of cute. These are just ideas for embellishing these. None of these are necessary, obviously. Or if you want to, you could you could introduce another color there. Put a little bit of maybe yellow. So that's just a little drop of yellow paint. Then I'm gonna You have to be careful about doing this. If you put this on a wet area, it's going to bleed with a mind of its own. It kind of gives it a sort of an ethereal look. Fairy look. And that's also a way that if you have something there that you don't like, you can kind of hide your errors. Or sometimes you mistakenly call attention to them. I'm going to leave that alone for a minute while I do the middle. Again, I really like making the white dots in the center. You could use another color if you wanted. I don't have a lot of different color paint pens, so. And then another thing that you could do is you could use this white paint, alcohol ink paint called, this one is called Snow Cap. There's another one called Blanco Blanco. And that's another way that you can do these dots. And you just use a really small paintbrush, or you could use a toothpick really to make these little dots. And all of these just give a little texture and dimension to the center of the flower. So that is the third technique. and there are many, many others. If you're interested, I will put a playlist of alcohol ink videos that I've used to learn. I've learned essentially from watching other people do this. So I'll put the photos of the finished pieces that I've demoed, and I encourage you to go ahead and experiment with it. Thanks for hanging in, and see you next time on another video.